It's time for the Voice of Reason podcast. Here are your hosts, Sean Phillips, Andy Van Beber, and Travis Kirkendall.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for joining us. This is the Voice of Reason podcast. My name is Sean Phillips. As always, I'm joined alongside my co-host, Mr. Andrew J. Van Beber V. How are we doing today?
Oh, goodness. What a week. What a week. That was it was interesting. I'm doing good. Still recovering, still flexing from the little workout we had last Tuesday night. That was quite interesting.
Oh yeah, and it's crazy to think that it's been a week, and like we were just saying, the counting is still not done in some of these states.
453 seats in the House of Representatives, and right now there's 422 seats filled. Still trying to figure out 31 seats.
And what is the sway looking like right now? Because I looked this morning, I didn't know if any more had closed.
So it's 216 for the GOP and 206 for the Democrats, and they only need
218 needed for the
218
majority.
is needed for the House for the majority, and there's just so many things just to look at with that. We'll look at that here in a second, but before, I don't want to get too deep into this. Before, I want to bump up my co-host real quick. Last Friday was our Veterans Day assembly at Clopton High School, Clopton Schools, and we had this guy right over here was our speaker. This guy over there we go. This guy over here was our speaker. Sean, that was good stuff. I heard nothing but great comments. I was so proud to say that's one of my good friends right over there. That guy making the speech, and then I just heard so many people making comments and compliments about your speech and how you had a standing O from the. I thought it was really cool when you had a standing O from the veterans over on the side. But just a shout out to my boy Sean. He did a great job on last week, and I was so proud of you. So proud of you.
Well, no, thank you. That does mean a lot. And yeah, no, it's been there's been a couple of them over the last couple of days that I've gotten to do. So it's been great. This is always it's fun to kind of educate a little bit, about the importance of the day. As it started as Armistice Day.
World War I.
Many years ago. For those that don't know, Veterans Day was started as Armistice Day because 106 years ago, which is crazy to think. Even World War I, but just over a century ago, the First World War, and it was on the 11th day of the 11th month, the 11th hour. The Axis powers in Germany surrendered to the Allied forces, so that is why we. And then, what year was it signed over to officially recognize Veterans Day? Do you recall, or do you at least know what president was? That made that
was.
Switch?
I don't know why I'm thinking Roosevelt. Let's see.
I don't remember.
It was 19. It was. I was right. It was Congress made November 11th an official federal holiday. 1938, a holiday. Well, that was when they recognized Armistice Day. 1954, Congress changed it to Veterans Day, so that would have been under Eisenhower. So
cool.
Which that was that's really cool about that. And people always get confused that Memorial Day is to remember those who were lost, and of course, Veterans Day is the day to thank
Mhm.
those who are still alive and who have served. So
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of one of the the funnier things is I had like some kid, I think like had to have been a third or fourth grader come up to me. He's like, "Hey man, I really liked your speech." I was like, "Thanks, dude." He's like, "But it was sad. Lots of people died." And I was like, "I don't remember even talking about
yeah,
people dying at all in it, but
yeah,
yeah, man, that's part of life." And he was just like, "Oh," so I just get it off. So
that sucks.
I got part of it, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So this election, I you and I, the weeks before the election, you and I were saying it, and maybe it was just we were drinking the Kool Aid too much. But you and I think you and I were both safe to say that we thought this election was going to be close. I
Hmm.
mean, and that's what I mean. Everybody was telling us, hey, this is going to be 50-48. This is going to be. I mean, when you come down, it was a close election. I mean, Donald Trump won by a little over 3.1 million popular votes.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, the election count was down as far as number of voters who turned out compared to the last election. 100 100 and I want to address that with you because you and I had this conversation. I think we talked about this on Veterans Day when you were out at school.
I think so. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
147 million people voted in this election, whereas when you looked at the last election, you know,
Like 163 ish million,
so
maybe
the
more.
yeah, so in that election you had one 8174, which was what is it? That's 160, no, 155 155 million. So there were 81 million who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 and 74 million who voted for Trump in that election. Compared to, it wasn't like Trump. To me, how peculiar does that seem? That there were almost 9 million less people who voted in this election. What's wrong with that picture? Tell me what you think is wrong with that picture.
Well, I think it's crazy. I think it goes to show one of two things, and I'm not on the conspiracy train rail at all, but I think what it shows us is last election was during a COVID period. So I'll be honest, I voted in person um,
I did too.
during the last election, as I did in this election. I am not, I understand why we have write-in ballots, but um,
Mail-in
I don't
ballots, you mean?
know mail-in. Yeah, yeah, mail-in. That my apologies, but I don't know what the process of mail-in ballots looked like last 4 years ago versus how they did this time around. I don't know if there was a significant difference in that process. I'm not going to act like there was or there wasn't because I just don't know. But what it goes to tell you is it doesn't make sense to me that during a period of time where it was COVID, where people were allegedly scared to come out of their house and do this, that, or the other, um, that we had a larger voting turnout than we did this time around. I don't. I heard some experts because oh boy, the experts this time around. Um, but there were experts saying that Democrats just there were Democratic voters that just decided we don't need to vote. She's got it in the bag kind of situation, which um, maybe in some like maybe in a state like California that would make sense, maybe, and maybe that's why there's California. Actually, I wouldn't really call it a surprise as to why there are. And you look at the house seats that have switched to red in the state of California. Um, there are certain sects of that of California that are very rural, very similar to being in Missouri and certain regions and very in districts that are very red, comparatively to some of their inner city neighbors. But it goes to show that look, I'm not pointing fingers towards the word fraud, um, but for an election that I mean I don't know about you, but in my opinion, um, I think that more money had to be spent. I don't think that by switching to Kamala with what 3 to 4 months up until the election, I think that the message from the Democrats was still there. I don't think that you have that many people fall off and decide not to vote just because there's a new candidate. Because let's be honest, like if you're going to vote Democrat,
You're
usually,
gonna right.
not usually, but in most cases, people that are left leaning Democrats that there's no sway, they're going to just vote for the candidate. It does not matter who that candidate is. I
Hmm.
would say it's the same thing for people on the right. If you're a diehard right wing leaning Republican, you're going to vote for whoever is on the right. You're not going to be swayed. I don't necessarily think that independent voters just didn't show up in the millions that we saw. Um,
Hmm. The
I know that there were a lot of people that were saying that they were kind of leaning, they weren't really leaning one way or the other, but I don't know. I think that all I'll say is that I thought that the RNC did a very good job with how they policed up um, ballot counting locations
hmm
this time around, by having lawyers present, by having representatives present in all of these places where they weren't previously, to ensure that people were not kicked out of lines at after hours. I know in Pennsylvania they extended voting hours at several different polling stations because
in
the lines were
in
so
some
long.
states declared uh, election day as a state holiday as well. Illinois was
Yes,
one of those.
and so I remember we talked about it a little bit last week when the election went down. Um, but the talk of the left was that there was a red mirage. And if, for those of you that don't know what the red mirage is, if you look at the election back in 2020, so typically in rural areas, it is easier to count your ballots. So if you're in a county
Right.
and there's 10,000 people, it's a lot easier
Done.
to get your
Boom.
ballots
Yep.
in versus that of someone that might have 100,000. So in that instance, because it's rural communities that usually turn in their ballots first, there is what the Democrats said all last week was that we were just seeing a red mirage, which just goes to show there are rural counties across the United States and in some of the smaller municipalities like suburb areas as opposed to like the main cities where people typically vote more right wing leaning. And what happened in 2020 was that it was you had this quote unquote red mirage, but then all of a sudden there was this. So again, this is something that doesn't necessarily make sense to me, but a lot of the mail-in ballots were counted after the in-person ballots is what
It's always yeah. That's the way
yes.
they
And
always do it.
so
Yeah.
by there being the count of the mail-in ballots, when you looked at it, when a lot of people went to bed back in 2020, Donald Trump was in the lead, and then all of a sudden there was this huge jump because most of these mail-in ballots were for President Biden, which is why he won. Which is why if you see there's a little graph where it shows like there's the two curves where it's curving up where Trump is in front, and then all of a sudden where those mail-in ballots come in, there's like a straight shot up, and that's where Joe Biden was. So
When
in this
you
instance, when people were going to bed, they were still worried, like, hey, are
what's
we
going
going
to
to
happen?
see the same thing? Are we going to see all of a sudden, Pennsylvania, are they going to have 200,000 votes for Kamala Harris overnight? Is that the kind of thing? That's why a lot of these cities, these states were called. It was actually really funny. I was watching CNN. There were two specific moments that made me laugh. One of them, and I don't recall the names of the host or the newscasters from CNN, but there was a guy that twice. One time he was being showed a graph of the United States that was showing every community that was uh, that had been voted on in 2024, and he said, "Now we're going to show you where Kamala Harris is leading Biden in 2020." And he switches to the map to show counties and the entire United States. She did not have more support. Kamala Harris did not receive any more support in any county in the United States than Joe Biden did in 2020. Um, and then the other thing that made me laugh was CNN kind of live. Their hosts are discussing. I forget which state they were discussing. I want to say it was Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania was the first big swing state that was called. Well, I think it was like number three, but that was like the big one where it was like if Pennsylvania goes to Trump, he's pretty much going to win.
Yeah.
And it was funny because they were like, "Yeah, we have. There's all the counties are reporting, but we're waiting on one county, and they still have 100. It was like 100,000 votes to be counted.
Right.
And Trump at the time was winning by 118,000 votes.
Mm-hmm.
And so then one of the hosts was like, "Well, and when they say 100,000, they mean kind of generally about 100,000." And this other host said, "No, they have to have this. They have to have the exact number, and based off of what is still needed, there are 100,000 votes to be counted." And so they're like, "So there's no way she could get all 100,000 votes."
Yeah.
And they were like, "Oh crap!" So they realized that they had to call the state for Trump in that moment. It was actually kind of funny, but
Well,
no,
Trump,
yeah,
because
I
Trump,
just I
Trump
would
won
love
by.
your insight on it because it was definitely very. I don't know. I've seen a lot of excuses from the
We'll
left.
get
Obviously, the
we'll
people
get
on
to
the
that.
right,
Yep, we'll get
they
to
are
that.
pretty much saying what I've seen from the right and people that were called cuckoos and wackos. And again, I'm not. This is not the finger that I am pointing by any stretch of the means, but the people on the right are saying this is a pretty clear indication that something went down in 2020 that the Democrats did not get away with this time. And I would love your insight on
Well, first of all, I do want to bring out a couple of points, and it was interesting you talked about vote and ballot. So this election right now, as it stands, and we still don't have the final number, but as of last Tuesday, 25.6 million Americans returned a mail-in ballot. Now, that's considering that in 2020 they had done 65 million
that.
mail-in ballots. Okay. Um, to me, when I looked at these results, and let's bring up Pennsylvania first. Trump won Pennsylvania by 134,206 votes. Okay, out of a state of close to 8 million people.
Mhm.
7.9, right at that 8 million threshold. Okay. When you look at the states that he carried, he took Nevada. He took Nevada by only like 45,000 votes. He took Arizona by a little bit over, not even 200,000 votes in Pennsylvania. Wisconsin was almost right at 30,000 votes. When you look at every one of these states, Georgia was the other one that really. Georgia was 15,000. 15,000 or 115,000. 115,000. When I looked at that election, there were so many raised eyebrows. There were a lot of raised eyebrows about how that shot up for Joe so much overnight. To me, my take on that, I'm still not going to buy that that the fix was on, because fraud has been a part of the American electoral system
Mhm.
since the 1800s. I mean, since the days of political machines. The Chicago political machine was notorious under the Daley family, the Richard Daley, the first, second, and third Richard Daleys. My brothers always had this saying, when we lived in Illinois, vote early and vote often, and the political fix is on in some of these places where that there's shady forces that are in play. You look at these big cities, your Chicago's, your Kansas Cities, your St. Louis, your Philadelphia, your New Yorks. But I still have a hard time swallowing, though, a 7 million vote sway. But then
Mhm.
when you bring it, and you brought up a really good point when you said, what happened? Where'd those other 9 million votes go? Where did those 9 million votes go from 2020? So you're going to tell me that, and that raised my eyebrow a little bit, was when you're telling me that 9 million people didn't show up.
Now, I, I might be wrong when I say this, but do you know now that now that seemingly we know that Trump is the president. We know that the Republicans have the majority in the Senate. All signs are pointing to they will have majority in the House as well. Now, with that said, is what would it mean for the states? Is it possible for there to now be a federal, like, if they wanted to push this, probably I would say in 2 years, so that we have it by midterms. But if would it make sense that we could see a federal mandate for ID identification for um,
It passed.
voting in the
It passed.
United States?
It passed in Missouri. It
Yeah,
passed.
yeah,
It passed
yeah.
in Missouri.
But I mean,
Overwhelmingly
that's
passed
just
in Missouri.
that's what I didn't know, if you know if that could be something, or if the Supreme Court would potentially strike that
I.
kind of thing down, because I know
I don't.
I know right now it varies state by state, but this
Why? Why? Why
and
don't
now
we
mind
have
you,
that?
well, here's my take on it. For federally elected positions, I believe that you can have a federal mandate on how the voting would take place.
Mm-hmm.
For state elections, if you wish for something that involves your state, then you can have your own laws stating, hey, no, we do not need voter ID. But I believe that for federal voting that affects federally elected individuals, there should be a federal regulation that umbrellas the entire United States,
I,
so that California cannot say no, you don't get voter ID. We don't need voter ID. Arizona cannot say we don't need voter ID. New York cannot say we don't need voter ID. Georgia can't say we don't need voter ID. No, you should have to provide a valid form of identification, and it absolutely.
can you buy
I know
into that?
we
Can you buy into that argument that people are saying, well, it disenfranchises people who can't afford to ID?
So
Don't give
I
me that
remember
crap.
one
That's a.
of one of the first conversations we had on this show. It was probably within the first 50 episodes, where we talked to my friend
I
Samwise
remember
about
this.
why individuals, um, why that is said, and the way that he kind of broke it down and explained it was, so the reason why is because it would, to go get your ID, you have to take off work, which again would take away money from you. Getting an ID costs money, and so forth and so forth. And that's why people don't have it. But again, where my counter argument is, okay, well, if you wish to drive, you need a driver's license. You have to have a registered driver's license, um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think that if that's the case, then rules need to be adjusted so that you can get yourself a valid photo ID for voting. It should
Mm-hmm.
be free.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if we are requiring an ID to vote, then
Mm-hmm.
you should be able to get it for free.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then if you work, as long as you are going to get that federally mandated required ID, then something would have to work out to where it's like, hey, if it takes you 2 hours, then work should have to cover those wages, or something, to where, hey, you're not losing money out of your pocket to go get a required ID, or ensure that those facilities that can give you an ID are open 7 days a week.
Yeah,
I think that would be the way
It's an
that
easy
we,
fix.
yeah,
It's an easy
it's a
fix.
very easy fix. Yeah,
I,
100%.
I
The way that people say, hey, disenfranchised individuals can't get them. Okay, well, what would be needed, and then make that happen.
the last time that we flew, um, it's been a few years ago, but we had This is before they required you to pretty much bring your passport. But
Hmm.
I had to get an ID for Briley and Bryson.
Hmm.
$15 a piece. And it's just a card with their picture on it. It says at the top, this is not a driver's license, and
Hmm.
it had a green, and it actually had a green background for for children. $15, and it, of course, standing in line in a small town is nothing like the DMV in a really big town. So I can't make an honest comparison. But in Pittsfield, 10, 15 minutes.
Hmm.
Whereas I could easily see it taking 2 hours, and like you said, 2 hours in a bigger city. I can see that
Yep.
easily. But I, when I lived in Pittsfield, and I will say this 100% honest from the bottom of my heart, I never showed an ID one time in 15
And
years
that's
of.
crazy to me. That's
Okay,
crazy to
so
me.
what they had was those. So they have this. So you go to where your district. We voted in this gymnasium, this church gymnasium, and I knew the poll worker, but that still didn't make any difference.
Hmm.
Um, but they had this big, humongous, one of these big industrial-sized three-ring binders that had every name in it from that district. You give them your name. Now it's a signature card. That's how you proved who you were. There's a signature card with your signature when you from basically from that comes from your driver's license. The signature
Hmm.
that you put on your driver's license then is I guess embedded on paper, and you sign next to it. And you've got some 70-plus-year-old, and God bless our election volunteers. I'm not knocking them, but you got a 70-year-old plus volunteer worker there who's now turned into a handwriting forensics expert to make sure that it's not
Hmm.
a fraudulent. Whereas here in Louisiana, here's your card. They had the little scan thing. I don't know. I'm sure they had that down at Whiteside.
Hmm.
Here's the
Hmm.
little scan thing. Scan your driver's license. Here's your ballot. Done and done.
Hmm.
And there was no chance at fraud because they could fake the IDs. Unless you've got the special whatever the watermarks they have on those license and all the stuff that's on there. But at the same time, I don't want anybody to be disenfranchised. I ended
Hmm.
our podcast last week, and we ended our live coverage last week. And the thing I said, and the things I've been saying to my students all week: democracy works. It worked.
Hmm.
Okay. Does it have kinks in the system? Yes. Mail-in ballot. Am I a fan of mail-in ballots? I actually am not a fan of mail-in ballots, but I recognize that we have servicemen like yourself who serve overseas who have that is the only way that they can vote, and so democracy has to work for them. Absentee balloting, I get that, but there is a greater argument for fraud within absentee balloting, and I can personally test this real quick story. When I first started teaching at Clopton was the year of the 2000. I started there in 0304, and so the fall of '04 was my first election year at Clopton, and I lived out in basically out in the backside of the county, Pike County, where Pike and Lincoln County, Hobart Road, and there's this little,
Hmm.
I lived at the Wedge there, and so, and in that year, I had previously lived in Hannibal, so I had temporarily registered in Hannibal. So I got an absentee because I had voted in the 2000 election. I voted absentee ballot because I was still registered up home where my folks lived at. So I got a absentee ballot thing from where my folks lived up in Lewis County, Missouri. I got one from Rawls County or from Marion County, Missouri, and I could have voted here in Pike County. Now,
Hmm.
did I do that? Could they have caught me? Odds are probably not. But if that could happen with me, is it happening with other people?
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Well, and
So
how many dead relatives voted at
right,
this election
and
and last election?
well,
Hmm.
and like I said, we said in the last one, widowers and widows are amongst those who do that. Well, my
Hmm.
husband or my wife would have wanted me to vote this way, or they would have wanted. But that's neither. but we were told. So that was the first thing. We were told that it was supposed to be close. What really floored me, and I don't know if you've seen this stat yet or not. First of all, money wise, in this election, so the rough estimates right now, this is the most money that has ever been spent in an election by presidential candidates,
Mhm.
congressional candidates. $15.9 billion with a
Mhm.
B. $15.9 billion
Mhm.
was spent total on combined federal elections between Congress and the president. 15.9 billion. Kamala herself had 1 billion of that
Mhm.
by
And you want to know what's
herself.
funny?
What's a
I a reporter went up to Oprah, who was walking in the street to her car, and asked, asked what she had done with the $1 million that she, was paid in Oprah with. I did not get paid. I would not have been paid for anything like that. No, that is
whatever?
ridiculous. And it's public record. It's public record what these
Yeah,
individuals made,
Federal Election
and
Commission. Yep.
the receipts for Oprah Winfrey's company, two payments of
Harpo.
$500,000 a piece.
Harpo. Yep.
So it's just like, yeah, maybe Oprah, you didn't see the cash that hit like directly into your checking account, but your company got paid $1 million for your attendance.
Yep.
I think Beyonce was what, 20 or 10 million.
Beyonce,
Um,
and then who's the girl who does?
Megan the Stallion
Yeah,
shook her butt cheeks on stage for
yeah,
$5
yeah.
million.
God.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my God.
Well, and that was one of the funnier things to me. I've celebrity endorsements from candidates are always
To me, that's
interesting to me.
it's yeah.
Um,
If you're my
I've always
fan,
found
vote
them
for this guy. That's so ignorant.
right, right. But what gets me about this one was I legitimately want to know, legitimately, mm, there is nothing wrong with having, you know, Cardi B come out and speak, even though she wasn't ready to speak. Her teleprompter wasn't working. She had to have
Right.
someone bring her a
Right.
phone after she babbled for 2 minutes. You pay her, that's fine. You have Megan the Stallion come out and perform, that's fine. But why, on a political stage, would you have her and her background dancers twerking,
Twerking. Twerking.
twerking on a political stage? I'm still the same guy that I will critique Trump when he would have Kid Rock come out and play American Badass,
Mm-hmm.
like
Right.
like that's it's the same level of stupidity in my opinion. But it's like, what made you think that was going to be the, hey, this is $5 million well spent on my campaign?
Look at
um
that booty shake.
and
Good
even and
God, that's
even
gonna get
the
votes.
situation where, like, I'll be completely honest with you. I think, I mean, Beyonce, they talked about the size of the rally. People went for a Beyonce concert. They did not go for a Kamala Harris rally.
Nope.
They said that, oh
Nope.
my gosh, I can get to a free Beyonce concert, and then she does not perform. So
Yeah.
you have as she leaves, you have people booing. You have people booing in the stadium that they're in. And there's what's funny now is I am seeing reports. I don't know the validity of these reports, so do not quote me. But I am seeing them, and I'll dig more into it and get you guys better answers next week. But I'm seeing that there are apparently now individuals, staff workers, that worked for the Harris campaign that are now not being paid,
Yep.
due to lack of
Yep.
funding.
I've heard that as well.
And now, well, and it was actually from President Trump's official. So this is where I from President Trump's official Twitter page or X page has put out that they have leftover campaign funds that they will put towards the Harris campaign, so that those individuals will get paid and they can settle the debts that they owe. Because that's the thing, they've spent $1 billion and they still owe debts. Um, I would be very interested. It was actually funny. I saw a thing. It was Kamala HQ, which was a X page that was dedicated to running a lot of the social media, for the Kamala Harris, um, campaign. What cracks me up about it is they posted a picture that went viral, and it was a snapshot of the staff workers. About 20 individuals, and I would say about 18 of them were white. And you know, and a lot of the comments were like, "This is actually rich. Like, this is fucking hilarious that you preach certain things, but it's uh, rules for thee, but not for me." And here
Well,
we are. We have 18 white college students running the social media program behind Kamala Harris, and it's just little things like that genuinely do go a long way. You have AOC of all people, who is going on and on Instagram lives and saying, openly saying the things that people on the right have been saying, is that Kamala Harris is a fake person. She is a
yes,
her
yes.
whole persona was a fake, and you know my feelings about AOC. I think she is one of the most
Oh, she's
dangerous
such a
individuals in
tool.
in the political hemisphere that we
She's such
have
a
in the
tool.
United States today. But I will give her credit, which I rarely do, where credit is due, because she has gone out and gone, "Hey, if you voted for Trump, please send me whatever podcast, whatever person you heard speaking, whatever that might have influenced you, send these things to me so I can listen to them." And some people were saying, "Oh, it's she's just trying to figure out." But I genuinely, based off the couple of comments that she's had, I am genuinely interested to see, what the Democrats do, because they have to take a real strong
Well,
look in the
they
mirror. I said this weeks ago, where I thought that, and it was after this started. I said, I really genuinely think Trump is going to win this. Was the moment, I remember, it was 2016 all over again. The moment that the rhetoric turns into, he and his supporters are
yeah. Oh, when you
Nazis,
political, yeah,
the moment that you compare the two things, you can you
identity politics.
that is when the undecided voter will automatically say, we're not doing the name calling thing." That's why the silent majority won, because if you remember 2016, if you were an open supporter of Trump, you were the most racist, homophobic,
Yep.
xenophobic, you were a
Mm-hmm.
Nazi, everything. And then when he won, it was from these poll workers. They weren't asking these people, or these people weren't being honest, because they said, "Look, we felt like we were going to be attacked if we said that we supported this man." And I think that there was not a silent majority this time around. I think people that openly supported Trump, loud and proud, were very vocal about it
Mm-hmm.
this time around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I think that the undecided voters, it really just boiled down to, again, it's like, look, if because again, it was things that made no sense. So we talk about the Madison Square Garden rally, right? we
Yeah.
we talk
Tony
about
Hinchcliffe,
how
right?
the thing they tried to emphasize about the Madison Square Garden was that it's where the Nazis held a rally. And I don't know, I could be, I'm pretty sure
N-
that maybe the timeline was, it
19,
literally lined up like
1938.
that. Well, I think it
1938.
lined up on like the same
Yeah.
day, maybe.
Yes.
Okay, which, coinkydink, but it's not like they went out and said, "Oh, you know what? The Nazis held it on this date back in
We
1938. Let's do
let's
it."
do that.
But
Yeah.
then you push this narrative that Madison Square Garden is this super
Mecca.
racist mecca for neo Nazis, and
Yep.
it's like, Beyonce's performed there. You have had
The Knicks
all these
performed.
celebrities that have endorsed this woman have performed there, and they were real quiet about it there, because they're like, I've performed in this building. So
Yeah.
so you that was the thing, is the second they go on the attack, um, is where the undecided voter, in my opinion, the undecided voter sees that and goes, if we have to go back to name calling, I know what side I'm gonna fall on.
Well, and I'll go. Let me run with that for a little bit, and then I want to get into this. What the Democrats pretty much have been doing since in the week past. Identity politics, and this is a term that is still fresh with me because we heard it last week. I was watching that in one of the things I had that I was viewing. This whole thing about identity politics, and there was a thing in the New York Times last week, in their op-ed. This lady wrote about identity politics and how that, and basically the point that you just said, how that worked against the Democrats,
Mhm.
because when you look at how the Democrats have boxed themselves, and the Democrats aren't the only ones who do this, because Republicans do it too, and of identifying, okay, if you vote, if you, like you said, if you vote for Trump, oh, you're neo-Nazi, you're xenophobic, you're a racist. If you vote for Kamala, you're a liberal leftist, a baby killing, blah blah blah. Okay, and I've shared this with on this podcast before. When I was a kid,
Mhm.
okay, the way our high schoolers now are so indoctrinated by their parents is ridiculous.
Mhm.
But when I was a kid, when I was this age, my juniors that I have for history, when I was a junior in high school, I could not tell you, honestly, I couldn't tell you who my dad voted for in 92.
Mhm.
No idea. When I graduated in 92, had no idea. I know he voted for Ross Perot in 96. That was the first thing that I knew that who my dad voted for. But I did not I didn't know who my buddies voted for. And I had buddies who dads were in the union. I had people who their dads worked for the state. I had people who, and even back then, Illinois was a blue state back then. The thing is that we didn't care. I think that it started, and to me, and I was doing a little reflecting on this the other day, a lot of this started with in my mind, a lot of it started with the election of Bill Clinton in 1992. Because of Bill Clinton, and in '96 when he ran again, oh, he's just a demon. He got he was serviced in the Oval Office by Monica Lewinsky. He was this, he was that, and if you vote for if you vote for Bill Clinton, you support, just cheating on your wife, and to me that's where it started at.
Mhm.
And for me as a personal vote, I first felt in 2000, and so what was Romney and Obama? Was that 8? That was 2008, right? Was that 8 or
Yes,
12?
because Kerry and Bush was 04.
Okay.
No, no, no.
No, McCain,
McCain
yeah.
and Obama was 8, and
So it
then
was 12.
Romney and
Yeah,
it was
so
12.
12.
Mhm.
So in 2012, there was this movement within the evangelical community that, well, we can't vote for Romney because he's Mormon.
Mhm.
Okay.
I remember that.
And so then, well, yeah, if you support him, you support Mormonism.
Mhm.
No, I'm supporting the guy who I think is best suited for the job. That's who I'm supporting. And I think that we need to get away from this whole thing. Like you said, I don't agree. I've said this and I'll say this again. The only reason why I did not vote for Donald Trump is who he was as a person. That's my own.
Mhm.
That's my own personal thought.
Mhm.
I agree with his economic policy back then. I'm not a fan of this new tariff, but I agree with his economic policy, securing the border, how he dealt with foreign these Kim Jong Un and Putin and all these guys.
Mhm.
I agree with that. But him as a person, he as me as the father of 2 immigrant children. Okay, some of the comments that he made weren't to me over the top xenophobic, but they were just kind of, and it was more, and actually it was less of him and more of his followers. So that kind of influenced me some too.
Mhm.
I don't think though that we need to get, because the Democrats are seeing that this bit them, like you said, this bit them in the butt. This whole the Nazism, his followers, because what was it that Hillary called them back in 2016? It wasn't degenerate. It was, what was it that she called them? She used a term.
A couple of words. Yeah.
But everybody was like, "Well, I'm that. That's who I am. That's what."
Mhm.
And the other thing that I think really drove people insane and was drilled in people's head over, and I've seen different TikToks and I've seen different reels on Facebook about this, but all the talking heads coming on and saying this is an election to protect democracy. This
Hmm.
was drilled into people's heads over and over and over and over again. Because what they
Hmm.
were implying is a vote for Trump is a vote, and it's still being said by
Oh
we're
yeah.
moving to Canada, we're moving because democracy is going to be threatened here, and blah blah blah. And the paint hasn't even dried yet, and we're
Yeah,
already
he's not even
he's
in
not even in
he's not
office,
even sitting. Yeah.
right? And you've already got oh, he's going to Project 2025. He's been on record saying, "Hey, there's some crazy crap in Project 2025,"
Hmm.
which was come up that came up with by the American Heritage Foundation. But the Democrats, I think the whole protect democracy. But the other thing is, if you didn't see this, Nancy Pelosi totally threw Joe Biden under the bus this week on all the Sunday news shows.
Hmm. Hmm.
Joe should have dropped out earlier. Okay? Agreed. Joe probably should have dropped out earlier. You and I had this conversation too that every one of those primary ballots that were cast for Joe Biden, they expected Joe Biden. And then when the
Hmm.
Democratic Party, what was that? Was it 3 weeks before the convention? 2 or 3 weeks before the convention, they say
Something like that. Yeah.
Kamala's going to be our person. Now I've never voted for Democrat. I don't support the Democrats. I don't support the Republican Party right now anyway. But if I was a Democratic voter, I would have demanded for an open primary.
Hmm. Yeah.
Period.
Oh yeah.
Period. Because I can guarantee you one thing: Kamala Harris wouldn't have been the one who got that vote.
Hmm.
I, if you would have threw up some of the top rock stars, I mean, even I'm again Cory Booker scares me to death, but you throw a Cory Booker in there, you throw the House major or the Senate Majority Leader right now. I know it's going to come up in the
I'm drawing
comment.
a blank.
Yeah,
Hold on.
but it's not Reed. It Reed's the Republican. Um,
Yeah.
Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
You could have brought a
Yeah.
Chuck Schumer up there. You could have brought a lot of different names to the table because when Kamala ran against Joe in the primaries, back in 2019, 2020, she was an afterthought. She was an afterthought. I mean,
Oh yeah.
because Joe was you got to remember Joe was still riding on Kamala or on Obama's coattails still,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
Then, a lot of people say, well, people didn't know Kamala. True. People, the Democrat, people didn't know Kamala. Absolutely true. When you have a political campaign, you have more time. So the Democrats, if they were going to throw this coup, they should have known it before the debate between Trump and Biden,
Yeah.
and they should
Yeah.
have known that. To me personally, I think they overplayed the abortion card. They
Oh,
overplayed the
100%. Because exit polling showed that that was like fourth on a
on their
lot of
list.
voters' list. Yeah, and that was what they put a heavy emphasis on.
And
Um,
what was number
yeah.
one on that? You know what number one was on that exit poll, right?
It was saving democracy, wasn't it, or
No, that was
something?
number two. Well, you're right. That was
Mm,
number one. Number two was
mhm.
economy.
Yeah, two was
Number two
economy,
was the
third was
economy.
immigration, and then
Third
fourth
was
was
immigration.
abortion.
Fourth was
Yeah,
abortion.
yeah,
And
and
that's
yeah, they definitely leaned way too heavily into that. And I know what was weird is for some reason my YouTube on my phone gets I genuinely don't know why because it's not like I have some crazy VPN set up, but I get ads for Colorado all the time. Like
mm,
I will get ads for Dave and Buster's in Denver and shit. But so I was getting Colorado political ads, and one of the big ones that I was seeing from the Democratic Party it was same-sex couples that were talking about how they were voting for Kamala because they were afraid of how their right to marriage would end if Trump became president. And my whole thought on that was
that's a state thing.
you are you are we are so far past that. We are so far past um, those rights ever being taken away from you. Um, eh,
That's
Donald Trump has gone on record stating that he supports same sex marriage, um, and so
when you get
it's
Caitlyn
like
Jenner to support you. Yes.
you are getting roped up in the wrong things. And then again, I there was someone that put it really God, I don't remember who it was, but they laid it out there perfectly where the Democrats have got to they have if because here's the thing, I think genuinely, depending on how this term goes, I think that right now I would say the front runner for the presidential nominee from the Republican Party will be J.D. Vance.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Oh yeah.
from the Democratic, my guess, I have two guesses. My two guesses are either Michelle Obama,
yep,
or Gavin Newsom. And
I hope not Gavin Newsom. Man.
Well, he's anywho, but
from what you've told me about him, no way.
But my what Democrats need to learn is that they need to stop trying to play to people's emotions, because here's the thing. If you're me, right? You take me, and I am working, I support a family of four. Okay. My wife is a stay-at-home mom at the moment, and she's an author working on independent projects. But I am the sole provider of income for my family. I see how expensive things are. I feel how stressed I am, constantly due to budgetary constraints, due to this, due fucking a, a gallon of milk. I have a 1-year-old, who drinks whole milk, and a gallon of milk is close to $5, even for the Great Value brand. That is going to Walmart, and you look at the price of things, and you look at the state of the economy, and then you go, oh, hey, it is not made up. It is not a made up thing that, especially for me, I have two girls. Okay. You look at the number, and this is not a made up number, but you look over the last 4 years, the number of women in particularly, who have been raped and murdered by illegal immigrants over the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
You look at those things. Okay. Do you really think that at the moment, let's say I'm an undecided voter, do you think that at the moment, the thing that I care about, the thing that is going to sway me to vote for you right now in this particular moment, is abortion?
Nope.
It's not the first thing that comes to my mind.
Money.
Or do you think that it is a trans person's right to, or let me rephrase that, a parent's, you think that children's trans rights are the forefront of what is on my mind every day?
No.
You think those are the things that are going to sway me in this election?
Mm-mm.
They are not. Those are important things that should be discussed. But if you are going to try to play on those heartstrings, where you have one of the most, and this is not just me saying this, Kamala Harris 4 years ago, let me phrase that, 5 years ago, this is not made up, was the most unlikable Democratic candidate. Not my decision.
No.
Her own party. Her own party said that she was the most unlikable candidate. So then you take Kamala Harris, okay, and you try to paint this image of, you don't have to tell me 50,000 times that you were middle class. You don't have to say those things to me. You don't have to go out and stage, like, you go out and you stage a thing where you're drinking, you're bussing beers with the ladies at a bar 2 weeks before the election. That's the staged publicity stunt that you're trying to appeal. You get, and oh my God, another factor that we could talk about more next week, but Tim Walz was maybe the worst possible candidate.
Yep, that was another thing that the Democrat. Yes, I was going to say that,
because let me tell you that Tim Walz is a pathological liar, and is also
military record,
and is also a fucking moron. He is a moron. The people around him are morons. Again, if you are trying to appeal to young men, young men, and you pick this guy that's allegedly, okay, who, mind you, lost in his own county
Yep.
the vote.
Yep.
Here's a guy who enforced some of the strictest COVID mandates during COVID in his state. You take this guy that you say is he taught football at his high school. That was the coined term. I taught football. To then, anytime he talks about football online, he uses incorrect terminology. He is playing video games with AOC one night, and a tweet that people are like, well, it didn't actually come from him. It's like it still came from his Twitter account, whether it was some intern, whether it was some whoever.
Mm-hmm.
This is again how we know you're full of shit, because you say we're gonna run a pick six on him. Again, you take someone who is an unlikable individual who goes on, talks about how I'm a guy that goes duck hunting. I'm a guy that, I like to hunt. I'm in the military. And then you post a photo of this guy loading a shotgun the wrong way.
I didn't see that. Interesting.
Yes, you can go on X and find it. You are clearly, you're focused on the wrong things. I don't give a shit how manly Tim Walz is. I could care less how manly he is. What I care about is he going to be a good vice president? Oh, he lied for some reason about his time in Tiananmen Square? Why?
Yeah.
Why would he do that? And then him just say, I'm just kind of a bumblebutt. What are we talking? Okay, so you want me, your undecided voter, to listen to you say, oh, I'm just kind of a bumblebutt with my words? That's who I want to be vice president? That doesn't make any sense to me. So it's things like that piled up. And when, again, you take an unlikable candidate, you sticker with someone that's you try to sticker with the goofy uncle to become the nation's goofy uncle, you create this mess. And when you try to force the, hey, guy that's, guy, gal who is undecided, you have a family, you are worried about the economy, you are worried about these things. I really want you to know that we will let you cut your child's penis and testicles off if you want.
Mm-hmm.
You have that right. And if you want your kids to get an abortion in 10 years, we're going to give them that right too. Oh, you're worried about the cost of milk right now? We've got a plan. I'm in the middle class too. I understand. I get it. They completely played their cards wrong. And it was one of the biggest fumbling of,
and
just a complete mishap.
I want to say one more thing. We're running out of time, but I want to say one more thing here. And you brought this up, and this was something that a favorite of the show. If you haven't watched Jon Stewart this week on the Daily Shows, he talks about what the Democrats have done wrong. And one of the things that he brought up, and I just want to bring this up, the Democrats were so, and you hit the nail on the head. The Democrats were so focused on wokeness.
Mm-hmm.
And the way Jon Stewart was, they were focused on wokeness when they should have been focused on brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
He said Democrats took American money and went and gave that money to the people who didn't need it or cared where it came from.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
And that, to me, that ties it up in a nutshell right there. And so we're going to see where we're going to be at for the next 4 years. So, I mean, let's let the paint dry and let's see what happens.
Amen. Well, again, great convo to our listeners. Be a friend, tell a friend. If you guys have any insights about what kind of swayed you one way or the other this election, please comment on our post or shoot us a message. As probably next week, as the weeks go on, we are going to kind of discuss some of Trump's cabinet appointees, as some of them are starting to kind of trickle in. The border czar has been named officially as of about an hour before we started this podcast. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramsway have been appointed to cabinet positions as well. So we're coming up on some very interesting picks, and it seems like he is the President-elect Trump is trying to bring his A game this time around. And I just saw we have a new Secretary of Defense that I'm going to look some more into, but all signs are pointing to he's a pretty badass man's man for America. So pretty excited about that as I get to learn a little bit more about him, maybe check out some of his books that he's written. But again, be a friend, tell a friend. This is the season that we love, and we will get to talk to you all very soon.
We'll see you guys.
Thanks for listening to the Voice of Reason podcast. Check out our previous shows and clips on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok.